Hey guys, I'm Tim with BleepinJeep. In today's how-to, I'll be showing you how to replace the rear main seal on a 4.0 Jeep engine and also how to do your oil pan gasket. You can't really do one without the other, or you shouldn't at least. Alright, well let's get to it. So you can see above my head here, this is the oil pan. You can see all this wetness. And that seal runs all the way full length from the nose here, right about where your serpentine belt is, all the way back to the front of your transmission, and your rear main is right about there. That oil pan gasket goes all the way around. And this leak isn't too bad yet, but with this axle out of the way, which would be exactly where I'm sitting right now, it's just so accessible that if there's any leak at all, it's stupid not to fix it. The rear main seal on a 4-liter Jeep can be removed and replaced without taking the transmission out. A lot of people think you have to do that. That's not the case, whether it's automatic or manual. And you can do this with the axle in place. It's just a pain in the rear. But anyways, we'll get this pulled off out of the way and show you what the bottom side of your motor looks like and where the gaskets go. And then I'll show you how to hammer the rear main out and how to replace it. Obviously, since we're dropping the oil pan, before we take any bolts out, the first thing we're going to want to do is drain all the oil. There's a couple different size bolts up here and studs, and I haven't counted them yet. There's probably about, I don't know, 20 bolts that run the whole perimeter of your oil pan. And they range in size from 11 millimeter, most of them are 11. There are some that are 1/2 inch, and there's 1 or 2 that hold your transmission cooling lines, and those are 8 millimeter. And that's another Jeep thing like usual, where they're switching between metric and SAE, and you got to be prepared for that. Alright, then just start unbolting all the things that look like they're associated with the oil pan, and we'll go from there. Once you get all your bolts out, the last 2 in the back here are 1/2 inch. They're right up in here. You definitely want to get your hand on this in case it decides to break off. I don't know what that was. Oh, it's the collar over me. And then you should be able to just start pulling this apart. Depends how it's attached, if it has a regular gasket or if somebody's used Permatex to get it on. In this case it looks like a regular gasket, so you'll be able to break it free pretty easily. And then it's just a matter of pushing lines out of the way and fishing it around everything. And you can see why this is a lot of fun with an axle. If you take the front end off first, you can probably fish everything around your transmission cooling lines. Ha! And there it is, the bottom of your 4.0. The metal bar that runs lengthwise pictured here is called the girdle. It uses 9/16 nuts to attach to your bearing cap studs and runs from the front of the motor all the way to the transmission bell housing. This whole piece will have to be removed to access the rear main seal housed in the rear bearing cap. And that's the old gasket, what's left of it in place, and that'll just come right out, no problem. And it's going to be hard for me to get that on video, but basically just grab a hold of it and start peeling it off, and it'll come all the way off. But I'm going to get my camera out of here so don't drip oil all over it when I do that. Once you get your oil pan gasket out of the way, do your best to clean any of this old residue. If look at that, the pan's actually dented right here. That's interesting. But if someone used RTV or Permatex, you're going to have a hell of a time cleaning it up. Oh, Isaac.
Dude, my oil pan doesn't come off.
In most cases, if someone had used a regular gasket like I have, using something like Super Clean or any other kind of potent solvent will be plenty sufficient, in combination with the scraping tool. And just Get it as clean as you can so you have a nice non-oily gasket surface for your new gasket. And the same thing will be repeated on the bottom of your block. Okay, with everything out of the way and your oil dripping in your face here, go ahead and start taking off your girdle. This piece here, those are 9/16 bolts. And we have to take that off because we have to remove the rear bearing cap right back here to get the seal out of it. Alright, with your girdle out of the way, the very rear main bearing cap right here, we're going to have to remove that. So those are probably about 15/16 or so, I'm not sure. They're probably an SAE size nut. I'm using a 21mm impact socket because that's what I have available here, and it fits good enough. Don't drop this bearing cap. I've done that before and cracked them. So here's our bearing cap, and this is the bottom half of the rear main seal. Now you can go ahead and peel this gasket out of there, and it'll be cooked in there pretty good, but with a screwdriver or something, being careful not to scratch any of this, you can definitely get that out no problem. Then we'll have to come in here and clean this whole piece up the best we can. The bottom half of your rear main seal is housed right inside the bearing cap in the last slot here. Apply some RTV to the entire underside of your new gasket before slipping it into place. Once you have an even coat of RTV, use a rag or a glove, anything, to smear it into more of a film, keeping the RTV bead nice and thin. You don't want too much in there. Yeah, it is. Once your new gasket is seated into place, you can use a rag and clean up any excess RTV if that's the case. Now we can set that piece aside. This is your rear main, the one that we're removing right now. You can see a little bit of orange on both sides of your crankshaft. We're going to use a punch on an extension to hammer those out, and it's a moon shape, half moon shape. So once you get one end started, where the punch is shown here, you can begin to hammer it out, and it will actually make a radius movement around the crankshaft and begin to feed out of one side. And then you can come in and pull it out with pliers, being really careful not to scratch your crankshaft.
Don't you feel lost without your Carhartts on?
Yeah. The upper half of your new rear main is going to feed in exactly as you remove the old one. Watch out for the groove in the center of the gasket. Make sure that it matches the same orientation as the bottom half. You can begin sliding the rear main into either side of the crankshaft into that slot. Use your hands as much as you can. Try not to use pliers or anything. You want to avoid marring the surface of the gasket. Once it's in as far as it'll go, you can use a punch to tap it into place until both sides are flush. Okay, now we're ready to put the bearing cap on. Before we do that, we're going to apply some more RTV right to the junction where it meets up with the other gasket. Just use your finger or a tool to spread the RTV thin where it meets up with the block in the upper half of the gasket. Be sure to look up the factory torque specs for your vehicle. In my case, the Jeep 4.0 calls for 80 foot-pounds of torque for every bearing cap. Somehow the tightening of the rear main bearing cap was missed in the recording process, but I think you guys get the idea anyways. After you get the bolts started, make sure everything will seat perfectly, and there's two little shoulders on each side to watch out for. You don't want to torque it down if it's hung up because it'll crack the cap. Make sure everything fits flush. So I have the girdle bolted back in here. I didn't show the reinstallation of that. It's really simple. There's no forward or backwards. It'll fit either way. And it just uses these 9/16 nuts that go on the bottom side of the studs that hold all your bearing caps in. But this girdle will just go right into place and you just bolt it up. And make sure you look up the factory torque specs on that for your vehicle. The next thing that you're going to want to do is go around with a razor blade or rag or something and look for old RTV, stuff like that, and just clean all the oil off the mating surfaces for the oil pan gasket that we're going to put in next. I was able to get the oil pan out with the starter in place, but putting it back in and getting the gasket in there, I'm going to pull the starter out just so I don't have anything interfering with it. That way I get the gasket in and make sure it stays clean the best I can. Once your oil pan mating surface is clean, place your new gasket on top of your oil pan. I chose a Felpro gasket because it comes with these things here. These are called snap-ups. This was the first time that I had used them, and I've used Felpro gaskets in the past and they work good regardless of these. But these things just thread right into the bottom of your block and they allow you to slip your gasket on first, and then they'll even hold your oil pan in place. They were pretty cool to use. The next thing that you're going to want to do is apply some RTV to the corners and the entire front belly portion of the pan. These areas are where it's most prone to leak, and then we're going to do the same thing onto the back where the rear main is. We're going to start right here where the rear bolts go in, and then just do the entire half moon of the belly all the way up to the edge of the other hole. The Felpro snap-up screw into the four corners of the gasket area where the 1/2-inch bolts were located.
With no numbers on them?
Yep.
That didn't even work?
Yep.
There's not really, I don't know who's going to be picking up the event. Usually start with the...
Once the snap locks are in place, you can slide your gasket over them and make sure they click firmly into place. Now on the oil pan, apply RTV exactly like we did on the gasket on both sides. Now you can lift your oil pan into place and push that up and over the snap locks also, and make sure again it clicks firmly into place, and they'll hold it for you just fine.
Here you go. Huh? Here you go. And you can take your time getting your bolts lined up. Heck yeah.
Now you can get all of your bolts started, and then once you have enough bolts in to hold your pan in place, you can remove the snap-ups and put the 1/2-inch bolts right where they were. Not shown on camera here is torquing all the bolts. I tightened everything in a crisscross pattern and I torqued them all to about 10 foot-pounds. You know what I'm going to say. Look up your specific torque ratings for your vehicle. It was very challenging to have the camera right here in my face and show you what was going on up there and try to keep everything still. So I really hope the video was helpful for you. And if you're not doing this job right now, I hope you can at least learn from the video. And there were a few shots that were missed in the video. I'm not sure why. Maybe the record button wasn't pressed all the way. That can happen. But anyways, I think the idea is there, and that's how you do a rear main seal and oil pan gasket. What was missed was just the installation of a couple things, but you guys got it. Anyway, Please thumbs up this video. It means a lot to me and it means a lot to everybody here at BleepinJeep. And please check out the website, BleepinJeep.com, and also be sure to subscribe, and again, thumbs up our videos. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Okay.